The oldest cult in existence has an agenda, and you are its target. These black cubes are found all over the world, and the reason behind their existence is much darker than you think. And the cult behind these cubes holds dangerous beliefs that directly affect you and me. Today's video uncovers the secrets of the cult of Saturn and answers pertinent questions like, what is the black cube of Saturn? Why do black cubes show up all over the world? And what is the final goal of this cult? Let's find the answers as we unravel the mystery of Saturn's black cube. Science was supposed to take us forward, but one scientific discovery sent researchers more than 2,000 years back in time. Here's what happened. In 1977, NASA launched its Voyager program to send probes into space to observe Jupiter and Saturn. 10 years later, astronomer David Godfrey pieced together flyby views taken by one of the Voyager missions, and what he saw was quite interesting. On top of Saturn's North Pole was a hexagon with a black dot at its center. Further investigation revealed that the sharp-edged structure was actually made up of clouds. Turns out that Saturn's North Pole has a persistent hexagon-shaped storm, and the dot at its center is the eye of that storm. Photos taken 2 decades later would reveal that the storm was changing colors. But the question is, why would this discovery send researchers back in time? Because that's where the answers are. Saturn got its name from the Roman god Saturnus. But even before the Romans came along, this god existed in the Greek pantheon, where he was called Kronos. And his story is not just fascinating, but directly tied to the hexagon-shaped storm on Saturn's North Pole. You see, Kronos overthrew his father, Uranus, and became the ruler of the cosmos. He had replaced his father and taken over his dominion, but what he did not know was that he also inherited his father's fate. A prophecy revealed that just like Uranus was overthrown by one of his children, Kronos too would be overthrown by one of his. After learning about this, Kronos came up with an interesting solution. He started eating his own children, swallowing them whole as soon as they were born to his wife, Rhea. And I must say that Rhea was a true ride or die, as she continued to bear him more children. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, a total of 5, all swallowed by Kronos. That's when Rhea had enough and decided to give her next child a fighting chance. That child's name was Zeus. Yes, Zeus, the father of gods. When he was born, his mother hid him and put a stone in his place. She wrapped up the stone in a baby blanket, or whatever the Greeks used at the time. Then she handed it over to Kronos, who swallowed it whole. As far as Kronos was concerned, he had eaten his last child, and was never going to be overthrown. Meanwhile, Zeus was growing up in hiding and preparing to confront his father. And when the time came, he teamed up with Rhea to bring his siblings back. The first step was giving Kronos a potion that made him puke up the 5 children he had swallowed. Once the gods were liberated, they rallied behind Zeus and waged war on Kronos, who was defeated and imprisoned in Tartarus, the Greek version of hell. Now, this whole story is packed with metaphors that tie back to Saturn and its mysterious black cube. First of all, Kronos was the god of time in the Greek pantheon. The Greek word for time, to this day, is Kronos, so it makes sense why he is the father of all the gods, including the chief Zeus. But despite that, he's typically seen as a dark figure, because he is time, and time brings about the scariest thing in existence: death. Perhaps that's why 17th century paintings of Kronos show him wielding a scythe, like the Grim Reaper. However, Kronos is different from the Grim Reaper, because he doesn't just bring death, he also brings about rebirth. Ancient people viewed time as a cyclical phenomenon, and depicted it as a snake or a dragon eating its own tail. This symbol, called the Ouroboros, was found across ancient cultures all over the world, including Egyptian, Greek, and Norse settlements. The similarity between the Ouroboros eating its own tail and Kronos eating his children is obvious, because in either case, consumption leads to renewal. The Ouroboros eats itself only to regenerate and continue eating itself once again. Kronos eats his own children only to regurgitate them and give them a new life. And that belief is the reason behind all the human sacrifices in history. There were times when people sacrificed babies to appease the dark god of time, Kronos, hoping that the death of these innocent children would bring about a bountiful harvest. So it's no coincidence that the primary harvesting tool, the scythe, was so often associated with death. One of the most haunting images featuring the scythe is a painting of Saturnus, who was basically the Roman version of Kronos. In this painting, the time god can be seen clipping the wings of Cupid. It shows that time doesn't just bring about death, but also erases passion and romance. The most haunting aspect of the painting is how helpless Cupid is in the terrifying grip of time that doesn't even spare the gods. No wonder the ancients were so terrified of the god of time. It brought them everything they wanted, but it also took away everything they held dear. That's time, a snake eating itself in an endless loop of not just death, but also rebirth. So Kronos, or Saturnus, was a very dark mythological figure. The ancients might have sacrificed hundreds of thousands of children and virgins to different versions of time gods. But why is that relevant to us today? Because worshippers of Kronos live among us, and they have a lot of power. Let's go over the evidence for that, starting with Saturn, which was seen as the throne of Kronos. Remember, the Roman version of Kronos was called Saturnus, and that is where Saturn got its name from. So the worshippers of this terrifying time god used to bow down to the planet Saturn, and whenever they had to sacrifice something or someone, they would put it on a cube-shaped altar. The offering would be burned, and after years of repeated sacrifices, the cube would turn black due to soot, smoke, and ash. That's how the black cube became a symbol of the time god Saturn. What's crazy is that the actual planet Saturn seems to have a cube on its north pole. As you can see, a flattened image of the cube looks like a hexagon, and right on top of Saturn is a giant hexagon made of storm clouds. One of the mysteries of history is how the worshippers of Saturn, the god, knew that there was a hexagon on top of Saturn, the planet. But that's not the main mystery we're here to discuss. What we are here to discuss is the cult that believes in this god and how far it has spread. This is particularly concerning since its main belief is the necessity of sacrifice. What are they sacrificing these days? Are they still sacrificing humans? And where is all of this happening? As far as the public is concerned, paganism was erased by Christianity and other modern religions. But it seems like Saturn worship has persisted in secrecy. The words Saturn, Saturnus, and Kronos have been replaced by one symbol that to this day can be found all over the world. That symbol is the black cube, and it's hard to miss. You can find it in public places like the Alamo in New York, and even in rooms that most people never step into. One of these rooms is the meditation chamber at the UN. If it was just those two, we could chalk it up to a coincidence. But there are way too many cases of this Saturn symbol popping up in significant places, usually close to a center of power, exposure, or worship. But what about the black cubes everywhere else? There are too many of them to be chalked up to coincidence, especially when they share so many characteristics. For starters, they're usually in public places where they can draw a lot of attention. Often they're positioned as art installations, but they're also prominent at memorials. One particular black cube draws a lot of attention because it's located at the UN, more specifically in the meditation room on the first floor of the UN General Assembly in New York. It seems like these black cubes are deliberately placed in areas where they can soak up emotional energy, from places of worship and meditation to places of celebration and mourning. These black cubes show up everywhere, and that includes movies like The Avengers, 2001: Space Odyssey, and Hellraiser. Now the question is, why? Why do black cubes pop up in so many places and across such a vast time period? Why are cubes shown in movies as powerful foreign objects? And finally, why is there a cube-like storm on the top of Saturn, the planet worshipped by the cult of Kronos? As we dive into the theories, I want to start with my favorite, the cult of Saturn theory. The idea here is that the prominence of black cubes all over the world ties back to a single cult that has international influence, and that's the cult of Saturn. It's historically proven that there was once a cult dedicated to the worship of Saturn. They saw him as a symbol of time, death, and transformation. To them, he was not an evil entity, but a much-needed aspect of reality. The theory part is that this cult went underground when paganism was replaced by newer religions. In hiding, members of this cult continued to propagate their ideas across generations. They also kept up appearances, adopting whatever religion was in vogue until they amassed enough power to make and break governments, schedule war and peace, and, above all, dictate culture. This ties in with all types of theories regarding secret societies, deep state, and a one-world shadow government. But what makes the cult of Saturn different is their view of the world, which they see as a limited existence trapped in the cycle of time. No matter how free you are, you can never transcend time. You can never defeat it. Your life begins and ends in the endless stream of time. In other words, you are trapped by time. The black cube represents this trapped reality. Spiritualists have tried to transcend this material reality and achieve nirvana. Christians believe in living with God through faith and grace. Almost every religion revolves around something greater than what this material world has to offer. This is very different from the attitude that Saturn worshippers have regarding humanity's purpose. They believe that being trapped in time is a good thing, and that limitation is a necessity because humanity cannot be trusted with transcendence. They view the Tower of Babel as evidence that humans should not try to transcend their animal nature. In the Bible, Nimrod wanted to build a tower with the goal of reaching the heaven. God punished his arrogance by destroying the tower and scattering its builders. The lesson most people take from the story of the Tower of Babel is that arrogance is a sin that invites God's wrath, and that the only way to reach heaven is to deserve it. No building, elevator, or plane will take you there. But the lesson that the cult of Saturn takes from this story is that trying to get away from one's animal nature is a sin, that humans don't deserve to be in heaven, and that this limited existence on Earth is all that they should be concerned with. So the goal of this cult is to hijack cultural, religious, and political movements to punish materialism. If you've noticed a steady decline in spiritualism and social grace, the cult of Saturn might be the reason. What I like about this theory is that it is quite grounded. We're living in an age where people are becoming replaceable, values are shifting drastically, and chasing money and material success is more important than ever. And that makes this theory feel real. But real can be boring, so let's go to the most entertaining theory, the simulation theory. If you're a fan of this channel, you might already know what the simulation theory is. It's basically the idea that our entire world might be a giant computer simulation. But how is that possible? Everything around us feels so real. Well, proponents of this theory argue that we're programmed to perceive everything as real, but that ultimately we're in a giant matrix. The black cube in this context represents that matrix. Some suggest that the planet Saturn is the control center of the simulation. Others believe that Saturn itself isn't as relevant as the black cubes, which soak up the emotional energy on which our simulation runs. While this theory sounds more like a piece of science fiction than a worldview, it does have its strong points. Let's start with the fact that we are only 2% smarter than chimpanzees, and think about how much more technologically advanced we are compared to them. Now imagine if our creator was just 2% smarter than us. How much more technologically advanced would he be? If we can design immersive games with AI-powered characters, he can surely design a simulation in which we are the AI-powered characters. And of course, if that's the case, we wouldn't even know that we are not in reality, because the simulation would be the only reality we know. Crazy and mind-boggling, I know, but it could be the truth. A less sci-fi version of this theory is the dimension jumping theory, which many physicists believe. This theory suggests that there might be higher dimensions to our reality that we are unable to access and even understand. If our universe is like a page, then a higher dimension would be like a book, and an even higher dimension would be like a bookshelf. And we could keep going from bookshelf to library and so on. The possibility of higher dimensions is an idea that most physicists subscribe to. However, the dimension jumping theory goes beyond that and suggests that we might be able to jump from our reality to a higher dimension. Imagine a character drawn on paper, a 2D character, coming to life in our 3D space. It's hard to even imagine that, but some physicists believe that humans can pull it off if they can just create a portal to the next dimension. A portal that many believe would look like a cube. Not only is this portal being worked on, but those creating it are also manipulating the masses into accepting the upcoming change. It's no secret that movies and TV shows are used to normalize certain patterns of thinking. Like back in 1968, 2001: A Space Odyssey was released. Then, the next year, we landed on the moon. Americans cheered the development because they had come to expect it. And that's the idea with every major development, like smartphones and AI. Each time, the development is rolled out in movies and TV shows. This creates familiarity and primes the masses to accept the upcoming change. In other words, what you see in movies and TV shows is very carefully designed to nudge people toward an idea. With that in mind, look at the countless movies where a cubic object is shown as a gateway to transformation and power. The Space Odyssey, which we just talked about, has the monolith. Then there's the lament configuration in Hellraiser. And a more recent example is the Tesseract in the first Avengers movie. This cubic object is central to the plot, and it can be used to create portals and open wormholes. That's exactly the kind of ability we would need to escape this dimension. But what if those in power are not interested in helping us ascend to a higher dimension? What if they want to enslave our consciousness? This brings us to the cubic singularity, which is the scariest theory in this video, mainly because of how close it is to reality. In this version, the prominence of the black cubes is a symbol for what's going on behind the scenes. A group of very powerful people who operate from the shadows is building a giant quantum computer to enslave our consciousness. It hits close to home because the moment you open TikTok or Instagram Reels, you experience having your consciousness enslaved by a digital algorithm. Your willpower is defeated by the platform. Now imagine if its algorithm was 100 times more powerful. You would literally spend your entire day plugged into it. Well, quantum computers could be millions of times more powerful than today's supercomputers, so the algorithms that run on those machines would be able to trap us all in a giant mega algorithm. Now, here's the creepy part. Almost every computer starts off as a black cube. The Next Cube, championed by Steve Jobs, was one of the most advanced computers of its time. Currently, the D-Wave quantum computers are some of the most cutting-edge devices on the planet, and they too are shaped like a black cube. Whether these machines would be used to trap our consciousness or not isn't even a question. Literally, every tech company is fighting to monopolize all of your time and attention. The theory part of it is the motivation. Why are those in power so adamant about turning us into semi-conscious zombies? Well, that's what the worshippers of Saturn want. They want humans to bow down to their animal nature and to stay trapped in the material reality and the loop of time. This also brings us to the Gnostic belief in the Demiurge, or the false god. The Gnostic theory is really a religious belief held by the pre-Christian Gnostics. They didn't see our world as the real world. They saw it as a flawed reality created by one of the lesser gods who wanted to be worshipped and admired. But in creating this reality, the Demiurge produced a world with pain and suffering. Then the goddess of wisdom, Sophia, managed to inject some of the spirit of the true god into the flawed humans created by the Demiurge. But humans created by divine touch, humans got the capacity to transcend materialism and achieve spiritual actualization. However, they also had the animal part that would always tug them towards their base instincts. History, according to Gnostics, is just a giant tug-of-war between humanity's higher nature and its lower nature. And the cult of Saturn is actually the cult of the Demiurge. They see him as the true god and believe that humans trying to attain spiritual enlightenment are arrogant. That's why they work together to promote materialism and soulless consumption. And the black cube is just a symbol of their power. It asserts the idea that we are trapped in this reality, and that's where they plan to keep us. And the scary part is, I think they're winning. To be honest, all of these are fascinating theories that make you question things, but ultimately they are just that, theories. You can believe them or reject them, but not without looking at both sides. So let's dive into the criticism of these theories. For starters, the connection between the black cube and Saturn is pretty weak. Traditionally, the scythe was the symbol of Kronos or Saturn. The idea that Saturn's cult later adopted the black cube is based on circumstantial evidence. The sacrificial altars for burnt offerings would eventually turn black, and Saturn was often the recipient of burnt offerings. But to say that the black cube became a symbol of Saturn is just an educated guess. Then there's the fact that we don't have any evidence of a higher dimension or a portal being created for said dimension. The closest thing we have to a portal-opening device is the Large Hadron Collider at CERN. It accelerates particles that collide at super high speeds, and one day it might be able to create a small black hole. Oh, and by the way, outside of CERN is the statue of the Hindu goddess of destruction, Shiva. That's very comforting. Anyway, my point is that a portal-opening cube is a reality only in movies. You can see it as a sign of public priming and argue that it will eventually be rolled out in the real world, but the truth is that we do not have concrete evidence of that. Although, if the higher-ups, aka One World Government, did have concrete evidence, they wouldn't show us. So there's that. But what is the critics' explanation for so many black cubes found all over the world? They would say that the cube is one of the simplest geometric structures to construct, and given that humans tend to go with the path of least resistance, it makes perfect sense that so many cubes would pop up. They're just too easy to make. As for the hexagon-shaped storm on Saturn, they believe that it's perfectly normal for geometric shapes to show up in nature, and that the hexagon storm has nothing to do with the cubes on Earth. Now, the question is, do you find this explanation more believable than the theories we have discussed? Let me know in the comments. Personally, I find it weird that we just accept the same black cube showing up in so many places without even thinking twice about it, especially when there's so much dark mythology around the motif. Honestly, if you ask me for my own opinion, I'd say the critics' reason sounds more unbelievable than all the theories proposed so far. Sure, I might not know the actual motives, whether it's simulation, dimension jumping, or cult, but I do know it's very weird. That I know. But if you think I'm just being paranoid, you can let me know in the comments, and I'll be happy to read and reply to them. Also, if you find the portal talk in this video interesting, check out my video on the scientists claiming that they have already opened a portal to another dimension. Spoiler alert, they succeeded.